Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. We are back. We took a couple days off for the Thanksgiving holiday. I am sick of turkey and stuffing because after having it on Thanksgiving, and then you have it again in a cold sandwich. And
I break it up. I still have a couple meals left.
Well, I have enough for another serving of stuffing and another turkey sandwich. But yesterday I made the promise that 2 days after I did not have any leftovers on Friday because I was going to the Leafs Sabres game, and I just didn't really want to eat turkey and stuffing again when I got back from the game. So I went out to a nice Italian restaurant and treated myself to a nice pasta dish to sort of satiate my myself after watching the Leafs not show up in Buffalo again as they usually do. But we'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, 2 days in a row. I don't want to see a turkey until next November.
No, I get it. Although I'm not that way. I eat turkey throughout the year. But
by the way, this is not gray. This is tan.
You're playing that game again.
It is. What can I tell you?
You are just straddling the line. It looks close to gray, but it's not gray. I agree.
Okay.
All right. So let's talk about the NFL gambling suspension that really got buried. We always talk about burying news cycles, and this was put out, I think, Friday morning. So right after Thanksgiving, after the Thanksgiving game, before their weekend games, and the player is Josh Shaw, and he was suspended through at least the 2020 season. So think about that. So all of this season that's left, full 2020, and we have no specifics on this case. Nothing.
And let's just say this. For most players, non-stars, if you are suspended through the rest of this season and next season, you're never getting a job. You're basically, you're out of that competition unless he goes to arena football or the XFL or something like that. And probably not the XFL because haven't they decided they're going to have like a completely clean policy? They don't want recidivists. They don't want people who get trouble with the law. They're trying to.
True. Yes.
Yeah, that's so. If this guy is banned by the NFL, then they're not going to take him there. But more than likely, after being away from professional football for a year and a quarter, he's not getting a job ever again.
But here's the issue. The press release says he was suspended for betting on NFL games. That's it. And then it just says the league investigation uncovered no evidence indicating any inside information was used or that any game was compromised in any way. Well, hold on. The minute a player bets on a game, it's compromised. That is the definition of being compromised.
Right.
I mean, again, we talked about it offline, Tim Donaghy. You don't have to be just a referee in a game, and we don't know if he even bet on a game he played. But if he's even betting on a game his buddy played, that compromises the league. And we don't know. We have to just, as fans, take the NFL's word for it here. Now, I watched 2 different games. Did you hear anything about it?
Not a one.
I watched a little bit of ESPN today.
Wasn't it before Thanksgiving or was it after?
Yeah, it was before. No. It was Friday. I think it was Friday.
They buried it on Friday, but I heard nothing on Red Zone. I heard nothing on the Ravens 49ers game. I heard nothing on the other game that was on. Damn it! What was the other one? The Fox game. I can't remember.
Radio. Nothing.
ESPN. Okay, ESPN is in the pocket of the NFL because they're part of the.
Doesn't mean, but if they still want to be a news organization, you should report the news. I'm just saying this was so underreported that even on Twitter, you didn't have that much of an outrage. And I'm telling you, this is just something that is a harbinger of things to come for other leagues to worry about. Because this guy wasn't the only guy.
No.
Can we agree on that?
Well, no, I mean, odds are you're right.
Right.
Odds are, like you have 53 players times 30 plus teams, you're talking about 1,600 players. just by process of elimination, the odds.
Yeah.
Odds
are some others have.
Right. But here's the thing, and I always use this historical comparative. We all know about the Black Sox scandal. The Black Sox scandal was 100 years. The 100-year anniversary was just last month. And Major League Baseball at that point thought, okay, we've cleaned up baseball. We've made an example of these guys. We suspended them for the rest of their careers. We've ended Hall of Fame careers like Joe Jackson and Eddie Seacott. This is a shot across the bow to every player. If they do this, they're going to face the same situation. Well, a few years later, Ty Cobb and Tris Speaker, there was some allegations of them doing things similar, taking money, basically the equivalent of shaving points.
Right.
Major League Baseball and Kennesaw Mountain Landis, who was the commissioner, had a vested interest in the perception that baseball had been cleaned up. So what did they do? They buried this. They made Ty Cobb, who I believe was player manager in Detroit. He was traded to Philadelphia, to the Philadelphia A's.
Yep.
This speaker was, I believe, the same thing in Boston for the Red Sox. He was traded to the Philadelphia A's, and they were basically backup players in the late 20s on, I think, one World Series team that won his only World Series as a bench player for the Philadelphia A's. But the whole point of this was it wasn't cleaned up, but there was a vested interest by the league to say, okay, we cleaned it up. And if the admission was out there that you didn't clean it up, then they look like idiots. And
I remember, it's not that long ago that players in Major League Baseball got suspended just for having associations with a casino, whether they did a commercial for them or they were there just
Mantle and Mays did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Funky in the chat brings it up. I can't tell you how many times I heard about the rumor, and it could have been just urban myth, but you heard about the rumors of Kenny Stabler when he was with the Raiders, about how he was doing something like purposely throwing interceptions or limiting the amount of points. No
proof of it.
No proof of it. No way to know if it was true or not. But the perception was out there. But as long as
and that's the whole thing with this. So instead of burying this, the NFL should have had this on every broadcast, on every show, but they chose to bury it. And I think that's the state of the NFL right now, is they want to bury as much as possible. So you and I talk about the games and don't talk about the other things that go on in that sport, which I'm not going to talk about the games. I don't care. You can, but I'm not.
Right. All right, let's start the show. We got a lot of stuff to talk to. Maybe we don't get all of it today. We'll probably be able to touch on a number of things over the next few days. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, December 2nd, 2019.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. We may be joined by Eck at some point during the show today. All right, let's start with the thing that we just heard prior to the show starting, Russ. I haven't listened to the full interview, but I'm going to have to now. The Spitting Chicklets podcast, which is one of a number of really good hockey podcasts out there. And the one thing I give them credit for is that it's sort of an unvarnished, not politically incorrect sort of avenue for players to express themselves. They can drop the F-bomb if they want. That's fine.
But a lowbrow broadcast. They do have good hockey content, but it is very lowbrow.
Right. Yes. But at some points you get the story. You get a story that we've both heard as sort of not urban myth, but sort of under the table or unsubstantiated. But Chris Chelios was on the Spitting Chicklets podcast and indicated a story regarding former Leaf head coach Mike Babcock. Like I said, that we've both heard about him dressing down Johan Franzen on the bench during a particular game. Remember, Johan Franzen's career was basically derailed because of concussions. We've heard stories about him basically being called out by Babcock that he didn't have the guts to play, that,
Right, we didn't know to what degree. If I say to you, Mike, you don't have the guts to do this broadcast, so
I'm doing it. So of course I do. But But this instance, Chelios basically said that he was doing it during a game on the bench, and that he almost had a nervous breakdown because he was dealing with the concussion issues, and that some of the star players on the team really didn't. I mean, they had. Yeah, they didn't. To their defense, their careers are on the line as well, and that's.
Well, here's the weird thing. Wasn't Chelios part of that group?
Yes.
So he's basically saying he didn't do anything either.
Right, but see that, that is the thing.
That is part and parcel of the problem.
Oh yes, but that is the thing. Babcock has usually pulled that, and we're not going to waste the whole show on this.
No.
Babcock. That was the game that he would play. He would pick out a player who was a borderline player. He did it with Frankie Corrado. He did it with Jonas Enroth. Guys, sorry. Terry says I don't have the guts to do a broadcast in a pink shirt. If you give me one, Jesus. That's good. I had to break it right there. That was good. That was really good. But he usually picked a borderline player who's, Commodore at the end of his career was a borderline player. Modano coming from Dallas at the end of his career, he was a Hall of Famer, but he was a borderline player. He could play those games with Frankie Corrado or Jonas Enroth. Normally, he didn't do that with star players. Franzen was not a star, but was a really good player for a number of years, and he did it with Marner because he was a rookie in Toronto. So. But the whole point of this is that, and this was the thing that I think is the most controversial, that Ken Holland comes down to the locker room and he backs Babcock 100%.
Now, does he know what we don't know, and Chelios didn't tell us, is did Ken Holland know exactly everything Mike Babcock was doing?
Probably not.
I'm going to guess probably not.
Right.
I'm going to give him a little benefit of the doubt.
Yes.
Because Chelios was not very descriptive about that. He only wanted to throw Holland under the bus too. And I think you have to be descriptive about that. And if Ken Holland said to you, I know what he's doing, and then blah, blah, blah. He didn't say that. Chelios just basically said, if you don't, listen to Babcock, I'll trade you. Well, we don't know. I mean, for all we know, Babcock was keeping it from the GM. The GM doesn't see and hear everything.
Right. And that's why there's plausible deniability in the situation with the Leafs, where does Shanahan and Dubas know that Babcock did this?
No, because they're not in the room.
They're not in the room. They may have been told, but there's no way. And if the coach denies it to their face, what are you supposed to do? This is a guy who had an 8-year contract for $50 million, and if he lies to them, or if he says that he just wanted to make an example and was a bad, all this stuff. Let's just the Peters stuff ended up going the direction we thought. Peters has been fired. Jeff Ward is now the head coach of the Calgary Flames. That was no shock. We pretty much it's been indicated that it was more a legal situation of how to get out of the contract or negotiating, because he resigned, but I'm sure unbeknownst to us there was some settlement in the final year of his contract. Because I don't know if Bill Peters is ever getting a job again. But
Peters definitely won't. I wouldn't give Mike Babcock a job, but I can't tell you he'll never get another job.
Yeah, I still have the feeling. What's going to happen is it's going to be similar. And Tortorella didn't have to have a come to Jesus moment like Babcock is going to have to. Right. Babcock is going to have to say, or at least sell it by saying, I've learned my lesson.
Right.
I've changed my ways. I realize I can't do things the way, bull crap. He'll still be the same guy, but he'll just shine it up a little better.
But he actually has to answer to it too.
Right.
He never answered to it publicly.
But will he get another job? Yes.
No, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Before he gets another job, he does need to answer for it publicly.
Oh, sure. And I mean, he admitted, I think it was through Darren Drager, that he
did.
But I mean, right. He did do what he did with Marner. I don't think he's going to touch any of the stuff that
he's not touching the other stuff. No,
he's not going to touch the stuff with Detroit because, I mean, let's face it. I think that the key with Peters was the racial aspect with Akeem Alou.
Yeah, no question.
And that was the bridge that was too far. And then on top of that, the abuse that he was giving out to guys like Michael Jordan, and there was another player that apparently he did something to. So that was on top of that. So I think the Alou accusations that were confirmed by other players would have been enough to fire Peters without the Jordan stuff and the other stuff with Carolina coming out. Now, one further thing on this, and I want to get your thought on this one. I love the throwing under the bus competition between Ron Francis and Peter Karmanos, because in my mind, Ron Francis won that. Because
he got Ron Francis.
Yeah, because Karmanos came out and said, if Ron Francis had told me that Bill Peters had done this, I would have fired him. Because that was basically, Francis is responsible for this happening in a sense, because he didn't tell me. So, and then Francis came out in a statement and said, I told Peter Karmanos.
Right.
So,
this isn't the first time that organization has tried to scapegoat Ron Francis. Let's be fair about that too.
Right. So, I mean, the problem is now, and we've had some accusations about other coaches that I want
to read the other one. The other one is from Sean Avery. It was in the New York Post, and he said that Mark Crawford kicked him after a too many men on the ice call, and he didn't have him serve it, and he got scored on, and then he really let him have it. And right now, the Blackhawks aren't saying anything. And Crawford's not saying anything.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter to me that the messenger is Sean Avery. It doesn't. Because, again, now because it's Sean Avery, it seems like the person in the team are just going to deny it because it's Sean Avery.
Right. See, and that is the problem right now. There is going to be everybody was skeptical, and even to us until the other – even us, Anthony and myself, during one of our off the post shows, when it was Mike Commodore who was coming out, because Commodore has been anti-Babcock since time immemorial. Yeah. So getting the comments from him, it's like, oh, it's Commodore, he hates Babcock. When it came out from other people and it confirmed Commodore, guys like Mark Fraser came out and other people were saying, about Babcock, then it was more believable because there wasn't an agenda there. But the problem is that right now, the guys that are coming out and talking about other coaches are guys like Daniel Carcillo, who's very active on social media, Sean Avery, who's very active on social media. So, I mean...
But it's almost like their opinion doesn't matter about these other ones. Now, nothing's been corroborated by like a second player, but I have to tell you, and I don't blame the Blackhawks as much as I blame Crawford.
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't do this, I would come out the next day in the media and say, even if the Blackhawks didn't want me to, I didn't do this.
Right.
But until he doesn't say that, or until he does say that, rather, we're going to be led to believe it's true. Like that's the reality of this. Even though it's Sean Avery, it's not going away. I think people who think that this is just going to go away, it's not. It's going to grow in intensity. Because there are going to be more players. Like more players have already come forward to Daniel Carcillo, but some of them don't want to put their names to it yet. When they start to do that, there's going to be a lot more content flowing in this type of content.
Yeah, there's been accusations, and I don't want to go down this road, but there's been accusations about other coaches,
right?
And they've been unsubstantiated to this point. But we know that it's going to continue to go down this road because it's news.
Yeah,
and I guess I can't say unfortunately, because if the coaches have actually done this, I'm trying to be to play it down the middle here. If they've actually done this, then they deserve to be punished.
Yeah,
but it's what we don't know is this an avenue for players getting back at coaches who maybe were not abusive, but they ended their careers because they didn't think they were good enough players or things of that nature, or is this truly abuse? And that will be borne out with the evidence over the next months and years.
Yeah, there's going to be more about it. We'll talk more about the action, but I don't want to hide behind the fact that we say, well, we don't want to talk about that stuff on the show. We just want to talk. I mean, it affects the sport, so we're going to talk about it.
Right. All right. Let's talk first about the two players that I know have been subject of X blogs periodically over the last couple months. Julius Honka of the Dallas Stars and more prominently Jesse Puljujarvi of the Edmonton Oilers. They're still property of those two teams because the 5 p.m. deadline on December 1st passed and they were not traded. Now, I have to say I'm a little surprised that neither one or that one of them wasn't traded, but I think, Russ, that this isn't a symptom of the fact that teams were trying to lowball Dallas and Edmonton to get these guys maybe for pennies on the dollar. And in the end, they still retain their rights for these players. So now that the deadline is passed, they can go, they'll play the rest of the year in Finland or whatever. But they're still under control of those teams. And more than likely, I would seriously doubt that Honka or Puljujarvi ever play for Dallas or Edmonton again. But you probably will see them traded sometime before or at the NHL draft in Montreal next June.
Yeah, but the question is, that value won't be any better at the draft. It won't.
Well, I mean, the only thing you can say is with Puljujarvi, I think that might be the case. I know that a lot of people got excited.
I think it's the case, yeah.
I know a lot of people were getting excited about him scoring, pretty prominently with, I think it was Karpat in the Finnish league. But nobody's disputed his credentials internationally. He played well in the SM Liga before he was drafted, I believe 4th overall in 2016. He has played well at times in the NHL, but not up to the expectations of a top 5 pick. Played well at times in the AHL. This was a symptom of him not wanting to play for what he considered a joke of an organization, which up to the point that they got Tippett and Holland, they were. But he just doesn't want to go back there. I think that the indicator here is Edmonton wanted to get a top 6 forward back for a guy who's unproven as a top 6 forward, and nobody is biting. And nobody will bite on that.
No, think about it from the Puljujarvi standpoint. He's a point a game over there, but everybody knows that league. So it's not like they're going to say, well, it's almost like doing it in the NHL, because it's not. We know that. But it still means, hey, he can still produce. Mm-hmm. Now, he's 21 years old. So he could easily play this waiting game. And every year that he does that, his value drops.
Right.
But Edmonton and Ken Holland made a big mistake here, and they should have just sold for whatever they could have sold it for. Because I don't think there's ever going to be a time where the value goes up, where all of a sudden they say, all right, now we're willing to accept what you're offering for this player.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And Anna apparently loves that point. Yeah, she's jumping for joy. She wants some meow mix. And this is the thing. We don't know for sure what Edmonton was asking for, but based on the fact that they have literally no one other than, if Draisaitl's playing center, then they don't have anybody playing the wings that's effective. James Neal has dropped off completely. Zach Cassian will throw in a goal here or there, but really they're a 2-man team. And I think they needed to get not a difference maker, but somebody effective, somebody who could, join their top 6 and be, an integral part of their core group in a deal for Puljujarvi. They didn't get that. They didn't even get close to that, apparently. Now, Puljujarvi will still have value even up to the deadline. If there's a team out there that's has a winger, I don't think they'll trade him for a rental because
they can't trade him at the deadline now. They have to wait.
They can trade his rights.
Oh, they can trade his rights.
They can trade his rights. He just can't play in the NHL till next year.
Nobody's going to do that, though.
A team might, if they're a team that is not going to make the playoffs. A team like New Jersey might trade for Puljujarvi because they know that they're going to get him next year.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, though. It could happen, but I don't think it will happen.
Stuttering guitarist in the chat just stole my thunder because I was going to say Yzerman might, because Yzerman wants to. This is a similar situation to what Tim Murray was in Buffalo. He made the Evander Kane, Zach Bogosian deal, knowing Kane had a surgery and he was out for the year. that fit in perfectly with their plans of tanking, finishing in last place, and getting the best chance for Connor McDavid. So
and as far as Dallas goes, even though Honk is 23, he's only got 6 points in 15 games overseas playing in Liga. That's a lost asset.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing that bolsters him as an asset is the fact that he's a defenseman.
It's a lost asset.
I still think they can get something for him, but maybe not what they thought that they. They
might get a 7th round pick, and that's about it.
Oh, I see. That's the thing.
Listen, in Liga, he only has 6 points. He doesn't play good defense. His value is very limited.
I will grant you that right now, but from what I understood from some of the reporting, he was sort of waiting half-heartedly, or playing half-heartedly there, waiting for a trade, hoping that he could come back to North America. Now he can't. Now, maybe he actually tries and actually plays pretty well. I mean, we know
he's been trying all along, but I don't think his value is there.
Well, we know his value as of a year or so ago was, at least in the minds of the Dallas organization, was at the same level as an Esa Lindell, and then Lindell shot forward, and Honka really hasn't grown over the last couple of years. So I think he still has value, especially for a team that is looking for defensive depth. But yeah, they're not going to get a 1st round pick for Julius Honka.
All right, I'll point it out this way, and this is why I think his value is shot.
Okay.
On that team, the 4th highest scorer is Jarkko Immonen. We both know him very, very well.
Yes.
From the Rangers and the Leafs.
Mm-hmm.
He's not getting an NHL job. The leading scorer on that team.
But Immonen's like 35, isn't he? So he's old.
He is 37.
There you go.
Okay. The leading scorer on that team, Julius Nattinen, has 20 goals in 24 games, 34 points. He is a Ducks prospect. He has never even played more than 1 full season with the goals. He's probably not coming to the NHL. Even with those numbers, I'm telling you, Honka is shot.
Okay.
He just dealt with it, and he thought he had some leverage, and he had no leverage at all.
Well, yeah, Dallas is basically going to let him rot the rest of the year. He'll probably play in the SM League, and then he has to hope that Dallas decides, okay, we're just going to walk away from this and trade him and get whatever we can for him, and then he gets
a round pick.
Yeah, I think he'll get more than that, but we'll see. Okay,
throw in the deal,
maybe. Okay, so I think first story we should talk about is the utter collapse of the Montreal Canadiens, who have lost 8 in a row. And I'm not rubbing my hands with glee because my hands are not in the frame, but underneath, just kidding. They lost 3-1 to the Boston Bruins last night. Now you saw some of the game against Philadelphia where they lost in overtime, correct?
Yeah, I saw all that game.
Okay. Carey Price is not playing well. John
playing great for a while.
But there was a gap where he did not play well in that game, and normally Carey Price is good throughout. They're without Drouin. He's out for probably another 6 weeks with I think it was wrist surgery. They're without Paul Byron, who's been an effective role player for them. Since those injuries happened, they've gone. I think it's 0-7-1 or 0-6-2. And last night they had a precarious 1-0 lead over the Bruins, and the Bruins scored 3 goals in the latter half of the game. The Bruins are one of the best teams in the league. Mark Bergevin's response to that was to put Keith Kincaid, their backup goalie, on waivers. Talk about just a sort of an inadequate, limp response to I guess if you're trying to shake your players up and say nobody's job is safe, then putting a backup goaltender on waivers is a way to do that. But
we also have Charlie Lindgren, so they could throw in
Caden Primo.
Well, Primo, I don't think they're going to throw in there yet.
Yeah, they might. I think I saw that he was the one that was called up, but maybe it was just there's.
That may have been a paper move. If they really put Kid Primo in there, it's a little premature, I think, but he probably could handle it. He was terrific last 2 years. So, but as a whole, I think the bigger problem here is what we're reading is players may not be wanting to play in Montreal. Now, everybody wants to blame Bergevin. I don't think that's a reflection on Bergevin. This has been going on since Vinny Lecavalier.
Sure.
This is like, and former Canadians that have left, like Pacioretty, this is a function of what that market will do to you as a player.
Right, and the ironic thing is that the one guy who did want to play there is the guy that they decided they had to trade.
Right.
Because his no trade clause was going to kick in July 1st. Now we're talking about PK Subban.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to have to deal with the PR disaster of putting pressure on him to waive his no trade clause, so they traded him before that. And Shea, don't get me wrong, Shea Weber's a great defenseman. He's come back from injury. He's played fairly well for them. And Subban is not doing anything great guns with New Jersey right now. So maybe in terms of the value on that deal wasn't as bad as people made it out to be. But what you're talking about is a problem for that organization. Sebastian Aho signed the offer sheet. He didn't sign the offer sheet because he wanted to go to Montreal. He signed the offer sheet to use the Canadiens, to get them to offer him a contract that he wouldn't have gotten with Carolina, that Carolina had to match. So, have they had to trade for Drouin?
Yeah.
They got Max Domi, who was not playing well in Arizona. That was a good deal. But usually they're the guys that they're getting in these transactions are not free agents who want to come to Montreal. They're trades where they have no choice but to go to Montreal. And that says a lot about an organization. Now, we both look at that team and see some of the young guys that are coming along, Paling and Suzuki and Kotkaniemi. And I think there's a lot of potential there. But they need more players. They need scorers, and they don't got it.
Well, Kotkaniemi's got 5 points. Again, in another year, we may start to make the argument they rushed him. Right. And this is the argument, and it's a fair argument to make.
Right.
Ask an 18-year-old to be a number one center in the NHL does have long-term effects. And right now he has 5 points. Was he going to be a major scorer? No, probably not like, a top 20 scorer, but he's certainly a guy that could have scored 50 points in a season when he was ready to, maybe even 60. And he still might do it, but now you may have slowed his progress. Somebody that we've talked about before that 2 organizations blew it on is Joel Armia. And again, this is a function of really ice time, opportunity, and actually taking a while to reach potential. Now, if you want to say Joel Armia wasn't a 14th overall pick, fine. But once you have the player, you have the player, right? And the problem is that no team gave him long enough to develop. The Sabres definitely didn't.
No.
They traded him quickly in that deal.
Yeah, he was a throw-in in the Kane and Bogosian deal. But I won't say that Winnipeg quit on him, because Winnipeg traded him because they needed to move cap space. They needed to trade Mason's contract, and they had to give up something that Montreal wanted, and Montreal wanted Armia because they wanted a veteran Finn to play alongside of Kotkaniemi.
Okay, so then we'll put it this way. Bad cap management cost you a really good player, because now he's got 10 goals in 25 games, 15 points. He's going to have at least a 20-goal season. He might have a 30-goal season.
Right. And
all of a sudden people are like, hey, look, Joel Armia is fast. He was always fast. He just wasn't a finisher for a while.
Right.
He was actually a better defensive player before he started turning on the offense. And in his last year in Winnipeg, he did turn it on a little bit.
Yeah, I think Armia is a 10 to 15 goal scorer, maybe 30 to 35 points. He's got size, he's got speed. If you saw the highlights yesterday, he laid out Pasternak. He uses his body. I mean, I'm not comparing him in the sense of he's going to be this type of player for the rest of his career. Maybe he could be, generate more offense later on in his career. But if you remember a guy like Scott Thornton, who was a 3rd overall pick for the Leafs, he turned himself into an effective 3rd, 4th line guy, big body, could stay with the pace of the league at the time. Armia can do that. I think that he's effective in that with that kind of role, but he's just never going to be a star. But
Yeah.
they need more guys who I think can grade out to be effective offensive players who can contribute secondary offense. That's why Byron is so important for them, because they got Byron off of waivers, I believe, and he scored 20 goals for them. So
yeah, now Byron, you can make the argument, all right, he's small, he's skinny, we didn't believe in him that way, fine. But Armia had all those other things,
right,
and bad cap management. Then, if that's what you're telling me, that's fine. That cost him. That really did cost Winnipeg, because that's a good player, and I'm sure they could use him right now. Now, Montreal just needs more of those guys, and they don't have it. And I guess they're not able to get them via free agency because guys don't want to come there. If that's true, it does seem to be true, doesn't it?
Yeah. Now let me connect that to, because they placed Kincaid on waivers. He's not played very well for the Canadiens. His save percentage is under 900. Goals against is 4.24, and I believe he's 1-1-3. They've been playing Price a lot, and they, like you said, they do have Lindgren, who has played spot duty in the NHL, and Primo is a good prospect. So they have depth, but they wanted Kincaid to come in and basically be that veteran goaltender who could play 25 to 30 games and take the pressure off of Price, and he has not been able to do that. Now he's been placed on waivers. He's making $1,775,000. Immediately, everybody, when he was placed on waivers, said, Eureka, Toronto, because Toronto has a problem with their backup goaltender, and that was advanced this weekend by Michael Hutchinson by a, I think, subpar performance against Buffalo. He played good in one period, then he gave up 4 goals in the second period. The team didn't play well in front of him, but we clearly note by watching the Leafs and watching Freddie Anderson that you need a goaltender to make a big save once or twice for the Leafs to be able to win. If it's an average goaltender, which I think Hutchinson is, that's not going to be good enough. So they need a backup who can make the big save when it's needed. They lost in Buffalo, which they, like I said, they've made a habit of doing that over the years. I've seen many of them. The problem is with Kincaid, it's not his ability, because we know from a couple years ago he has the ability. He carried the Devils to a playoff spot, so he has the ability, and I think could be an effective backup. The problem is the Leafs have no cap room. Right. They cannot claim a guy who's $1.75 million on the cap.
That's going to kill them.
That's going to the only way they could do it is if they waited for him to clear waivers, if they traded Hutchinson as part of the deal, if they threw another contract in there, or if Montreal retained salary. And Montreal is not going to do that for a team in their own division. So I don't think now, everybody's saying Hutchinson is below replacement level, or below average, as Joe Morello said. Maybe, but the problem is, and Kyle Dubas came out today,
until they can do something about that.
Right, and this is the thing. Kyle Dubas came out and said, I would like to see our team play better in front of Hutchinson, which tells me that they have tried to get backups, and they're basically getting held up for ransom. That teams know that they're bad with their backup goaltenders, and Tristan Jarry is out there, or Jack Campbell, or Casey DeSmith, and I'm sure teams are asking for Liljegren or Bracco, or like some of their good prospects, and the Leafs are probably saying not a chance in hell. So they need Hutchinson to step up, or they need the team to step up in front of Hutchinson for them to win. They have started their backups in, I think it's 7 games, one of a possible 14 points.
All right, let me ask you a dumb question. So, did the Devils pick him up and send Blackwood back down?
No.
Why? He's only 22. I'm sure they can do it without a problem. He has struggled a little bit. Dominguez got a 1.76 goals against with like a .930 save percentage. What if they bring him back and that helps their situation? It might.
It might help their situation. The question you have to ask yourselves is, do they want to help? Do they want to help their situation?
I think they do, because I think Shiro at this point, if he didn't, they would have fired John Hines already. So I think they do want to help their situation. And I wouldn't be shocked if they do that.
What are Blackwood's stats right now?
Blackwood, he has got a 3.12 goals against, 898 save percentage in his last 5 games. 912, 821, 889, 917, 864.
They have the cap room to do whatever they want to, but they've already
19 goals in the last 5 games.
They already have over $1 million invested in Domingue in terms of salary cap. They have $6 million in the minors with Corey Schneider. Are they admitting that Corey Schneider is done, or
that's their admission that he's done?
Or did they send him down to Binghamton to get work and come back up?
I mean, look, he's Corey Schneider. If he shows something, they'll bring him back. But I think it's mostly an admission he's done, and I think at this point, I think they would bring Kincaid back. I do.
Now, and that's possible, and they would be at the top of the waiver claim list. And the thing is, with the Devils having cap room, they could also, retain salary on a Domingue or retain salary on a Kincaid if they claim him and trade him to a team that needs a backup goaltender. They could get an asset for a guy like that if a team like Toronto is really hard up. I just know that Montreal will not do Toronto any favors because they're in competition with Toronto for a playoff spot. So go ahead.
No, that's fine. I wanted to switch gears.
Go ahead.
And ask if you are going to apologize to the Minnesota Wild.
Why should I?
Because right now, as it stands, they are tied with the Nashville Predators. They're 2 points out of Calgary, Vegas, and Vancouver. So 2 points out of a wild card spot. They have one of the best home records at 7-1-2, and they seem to have banded together with this personal issue that Devin Dubnyk has going on with his wife, this health issue, which a lot of times, as you know, teams will pull and pull together on something like that. We saw that happen with Martin St. Louis, and I don't know. It seems like Minnesota's pulling together a little bit here. They won again the other day in overtime. Boudreau still has a job. Right. They're literally 2 points out of the playoffs. I know about the loser point and everything else, but for this team that looked completely out of it, they're not completely out of it.
No, I mean, I honestly, the Wild's play of recently has been sort of under the radar for me. I did see them when they were recently in Buffalo, and they beat the Sabres. I think it was 3-1 or 4-1. That was in the midst of Buffalo's losing streak. Right. So they've sort of regrouped. I know that guys like Greenway are playing better of late, and you've said it many a time, like with Dubnyk, who's one of the better goaltenders in the league, when he gets on a roll, and he always gets on a roll this time of year. It's usually November, December. He's like one of the best goalies in the league. Right.
And but he's not there, but everybody else has gotten on a roll in his place.
Yeah.
And that's probably, helping him mentally because he has to deal with things at home, but his team is really rising to the occasion. One more thing. So let's talk again about the Chicago Blackhawks.
Hold on to the Blackhawks because I just want to finish. I want to finish the backup goalie thing. Not what you're talking about, but on I believe it was Wednesday night, Jonathan Bernier had to go in for Detroit after Jimmy Howard got hurt.
Right.
Bernier had like 102 temperature. He toughed it out.
Whatever the hell that is.
What's that?
He had an E-bug.
Okay, I don't know what that is.
That is a new thing. I'll tell you what it is.
Okay, while you're looking that up, I'll tell you he had to get an IV in between periods. He faced over 40 shots. They lost 6-0, but there was a position where normally if he wasn't even dressed at the beginning of the game and he had to step in there. I do give Bernier a lot of credit for that. But first they call up Calvin Pickard, then they trade for Eric Comrie, and they gave up almost nothing. I think it's Sayarvi, a Finnish defenseman who's been in Grand Rapids for a few years. He's not a grade A prospect. He's a grade B or C prospect. So they really didn't have to give up a lot for Eric Comrie. And a lot of people think Eric Comrie is a potential good backup. So I don't know what the prices are in terms of backups, but I have a feeling that because Toronto it's so known out there that they're in such desperate need for a backup that they're getting held up for ransom a little bit. And I can't blame other managers for doing that, but that's probably what's going on right now.
Yeah, from what I saw in Cal Pickard the other day, and I understand he hasn't played in a while, I don't think he has any value. I don't.
Right. And the only value that he would have for the Leafs in that instance is that they know him.
Right. I still don't know if that's something where it's a thing where it's like, okay, let's give this a try, because there's no guarantee they're going to be in any better situation.
Right. All right. So go back to the Blackhawks.
Okay. Well, hold on. So this e-bug thing.
Oh yeah.
It is a situation where it seems it's a respiratory illness. Okay. And I guess it seems to come into play with a lot of people, in like a locker room situation, that kind of thing. And so you have to go on antibiotics. And I saw people taking like blown up photos of Bernier, and it seemed like, he was like almost out of it playing.
Did he get this bug from an email?
No, he did not get it from an email. All right. So back to the Chicago Blackhawks. 26 games in, they are 1 point ahead. So they have one game in hand on the Kings, and they are 1 point ahead. Switching to the East, they're a lot ahead of Detroit, but New Jersey has 22 points, and they've played one less game. So really, what the hell are the Blackhawks? Because their road record is 3-5-3. Like, I still think Jeremy Colliton's going to get fired.
Well, it's funny because Patrick Sharp was on Hockey Central Sportsnet today, and he believes that the mindset of the Blackhawks right now is of a team sort of rebuilding on the fly, and that Colliton is this young coach who is going to get time to turn things around. Now, I don't know. I mean,
the veterans allow that? That's the question.
Well, and that was the question asked to Sharp, is whether this is sort of like, Taves and Kane and the leadership group of the cup champion Blackhawks sort of sharing power with Colliton, or is it Colliton as the coach? And he basically said Colliton's the coach. Well, the problem is with that team is that Taves and Kane are still great players. Duncan Keith and Brent Seabrook are not. Corey Crawford, has had his moments here or there, but I don't know what Stan Bowman does to get rid of Seabrook or Keith. He can't really, because they have long-term big money and nobody is stupid. And nobody's going to take those contracts on. So they're stuck. And, the thing is, you could say, well, Colliton's not doing a great job. You could also say he's got boat anchors on that roster that he has to manage.
Right. And it's getting worse because they've dropped 5 of 6, and now they're going to play a man short against the Blues because Shaw has something wrong with them, and nobody's saying why, but because of the salary cap, they can't do anything about it.
Right. And here I want to talk about Taylor.
And this is the exact reason why I said, regardless of Colliton, I'll remove him from the conversation, why I never thought the Blackhawks would be a serious contender, because look at all the things they have to overcome during a season. They could get hot again like the end of last season, but they're not going to make the playoffs. They don't have enough bodies that they could rotate in and out of there because of the salary cap to make that happen.
Right. There are some good players on that team. They're just not enough, and they can't fill those positions because of their cap situation. And the cap situation, I mean, it's not only Chicago. And I'll just go back to Toronto on this. Mitch Marner skated in practice this morning. He supposedly will be back a little earlier than expected, which means the end of the week.
Okay.
He can't come off until, I think it's 24 days is the minimum on LTIR. They had to put him on LTIR because they had no cap space. Once he comes back, and I think Trevor Moore is pretty close to being back too, they have to cut down to 21 players. They're only carrying 6 defensemen right now because of the cap situation. That's the reason why they can't claim a goaltender on off of waivers. I mean, they could send Hutchinson down to the minors and clear the salary that way, but they're at 49 contracts too. So they have one. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Leafs make a move simply to alleviate slightly their cap situation, but that's not a unique situation because there are a number of teams out there that are up against it. I mean, Buffalo is up against it right now, and just by coincidence, as soon as Bogosian came back, Vladimir Sobotka went out indefinitely with a knee injury and might be out for the year. So there's the cap crunch alleviation there. All right,
who the reporter is Guy Larac? Should I even report? I don't even know if I can mention what he's reporting. I'm trying to find out. Have you ever heard of him?
No, I haven't. Is there a check mark next to his name?
I can't even find his name on Twitter, so I'm going to leave that alone.
Yeah, it's not Bunny Larac. I know that.
No.
Now let's talk about the Taylor Hall stuff, which is really starting to pick up. We'll take some questions in chat after this for a few minutes. We'll touch on this more tomorrow, but Taylor Hall's name has been out there all year, but only in the last, I'd say, 3 or 4 days has it basically come out from everybody, from Elliot Friedman, from Pierre LeBrun, from Darren Drager, everyone, Chris Johnston, that Ray Shero is he is not saying he's definitely going to be traded, but he's listening to offers. And
I felt like he was shying away from the media in Philly pre-game when sometimes you could talk to players. He was definitely not wanting to come out when we were all waiting on Wayne Simmons, and he just went back into the locker room because he thought he'd hang out in the hallway. So this has been a while. And you remember I reported even a little before that, I didn't think he would re-sign with them. But then when I saw that, I was like, he is not re-signing with them. He just does not seem like he wants to be there long term. So they have to. This is the single most important trade that Ray Shero will ever make for the Devils, and this will actually determine the course they're going to be on for the next 3 or 4 years. Honestly, because if this trade doesn't work out, the Devils get caught in that gully for a while.
Yeah.
Waiting for guys to develop, waiting for picking up free agents. They have to get bona fide talent on this deal.
Well, I haven't seen. I have a couple of people in the chat, including Joe, just mentioned that Hall is skating on the third line at practice for the Devils. So I mean, I don't know.
Why?
I don't know what that means, unless they're just that's
why. What is the? I mean, again, John Hines. Honestly, I'm going to go back. I have to say this because, and it's not because I ever want to see anybody fired. I don't. But that game against the Rangers, they gave up 2 shorthanded goals.
Yes.
The Devils' power play was abysmal. When special teams are abysmal and you give up 2 shorthanded goals and you get beat up in a fight in front of your home crowd, what is left as a coach? I don't understand, unless they just don't care for this year, like you said, which I don't believe. So I just don't understand why they would leave him in there.
I think it might be possible, Russ.
It is possible, I guess. It just doesn't make sense.
Because Shero, he's got another bullet in his gun. He can fire Hines and hire another coach.
Right.
And it may be a situation. And remember, with the exception of Subban, who has another 2 years left in his contract, all the things that they did to sort of immediately upgrade that roster were 1-year deals.
And it was great on paper, but it's been awful in reality.
But Wayne Simmons apparently has been a mistake there, and that's a 1-year deal. They've got Vatanen, who's a rental, who's a pending UFA, so he will likely be traded.
I mean, we all love Wayne Simmons, but on this show, we've been saying for over a year, he is not the guy anymore.
Yeah. Now, we'll do this tomorrow, but there are people in the chat who are saying, here's what these teams would need to offer. And
every used car salesman or fan, I should call them, is trying to get Taylor Hall on their team. And very few have even put up real assets and real players to get him. And just because his contract is up doesn't mean Taylor Hall just doesn't have tremendous value. What it does mean is your team is going to have to believe they're going to win a cup if they get Taylor Hall and pay accordingly.
Now, what I would say is, and I know that I've heard a few people talk about this, that the deal for Hall, the return for the Devils would have to be similar to what Ottawa got for Mark Stone. But the people have to remember is that Mark Stone signed a contract right after that deal. They got a grade A prospect in Eric Brandstrom.
Well, I think grade B, but okay.
I know that. I mean,
I'm just telling you my thoughts.
No, I know. Okay, you say grade B, and a lot of other people think he's not top pairing because of his size, but a top 4 defenseman.
No, I think that's fair. He could in his best playing days could be top 4. I agree.
So they got him, and they got, I believe, another prospect in their draft pick. That is the range that people would expect to get for Hall, and probably putting in a conditional first to get. Yeah,
you win the cup, you're giving us a first,
or if he resigns,
final maybe,
right? Or if he resigns,
Right
now, and these are the names. These are the names of the teams that have been reported in terms of having heavy interest: Colorado, Calgary, Montreal. Montreal and Colorado have no cap issues, so they could take on Hall's $6 million contract and trade prospects going back.
Montreal makes no sense. They're not making the playoffs if they get Taylor Hall. That's not their source of their problem.
I agree.
One of their problems.
That's one of their problems, but not the whole problem.
Same with Calgary. Calgary's not making the playoffs if they get Taylor Hall. It's not the problem. It's one of their problems.
Colorado makes a lot of sense. When we had Kevin on the show last, he said that he believes that Colorado. Now the thing is Shiro going to be asking? Is Shiro going to try to shoot the moon and say, "Well, right"? But he's not going to get. He's not getting Bowen Byram out of the Avalanche. No. He might get Connor Timmins.
He might get Connor Timmins. I mean, we don't even know if he's necessarily looking for a defenseman.
No.
And from Vancouver, there's some real good forwards. Like, as an example, if he got Jake Virtanen, the thought of a first, and some other prospect.
Well, they don't have a first because they traded it for Jake.
Right.
So,
so that's Vancouver's not going to be the team they trade with.
Arizona might be.
Arizona could be.
People have mentioned Boston up there. Boston has got a lot of prospects. They don't have a lot of cap space though, so they.
And that's the thing. Him re-signing with them is probably not going to happen. So as a pure rental, Boston's going to come up cheap in what they offer compared to some other teams that think they might be able to re-sign him. Like Colorado, who probably believe they could re-sign him.
Joe Morello has dipped into the psychedelic mushrooms and it says he's coming to the island. Is it Fantasy Island there, Joe?
I mean, again, if the Islanders come up with more cap space, they probably could re-sign him. But that means that the draft or something, they have to move like a Letty or a Boychuk.
Right.
In the interim, are they going to give up Noah Dobson or Alva Wahlstrom? Because you're going to lose one of them.
Right.
That's what you have to come to terms with if you're going to make that deal. They might. That's usually not what Lou does. And I don't want to hear from Funky Cold Zadina because he's going to offer me a Ford, and Fords stink. Just ask the Lion. Anyhow, go ahead.
Jeez. Lou's Island, Joe says. Lou's Island. Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Maybe we'll go through 4 or 5 teams and say what kind of packages they would have to offer in a deal for Taylor Hall, because I do think he is getting traded. I don't think it's.
Oh, no, he's getting traded.
Yeah, I don't think it's a question of if. It's a question of when.
Yep.
All right. Let's see. Any questions in the chat? We will quickly go through, and if not, we will end the show and be back tomorrow. I don't see any questions. Oh, talking picks. Any good players who do they look like? I don't know. Sorry, I can't read. I don't understand what Lance is. Talking picks. Any good players who do they look like in the league? I don't know what you're asking.
Oh, I mean, I guess is he the only guys right now who I think could make the NHL out of the draft are Lafreniere, Byfield, and Jamie Drysdale. Those 3 I feel like have a chance, but it's very hard for defensemen to do it. But I think you could possibly make an argument that he might. So those are the 3 right now. I don't have enough on everybody else to tell you if there's going to be more. And you saw this year, There's not that many.
Right. Asmir asked, what would the Devils get for trading Vatanen? Vatanen is a top 4 defenseman. He's right-handed.
His contract is up, but he is a right-handed top 4 defenseman.
His salary is under $5 million, and they could retain salary. So I think they could get a conditional first for a team that's desperate for a defenseman.
You have to be pretty desperate. I don't know if they'll get a conditional first.
Yeah. Well, I mean, conditional, like –
if he resigns.
Well, yeah, maybe extra.
Maybe the only condition that someone would be willing to do it.
But a team that's at the high, really high in the standings that is looking for a defenseman, like if Washington had injuries on defense and they would retain 50% of the salary, Washington's first round pick is going to be 26th through 31st.
Let's say it's Boston, right? You can make an argument where Boston may want to make this deal. They're not going to give a conditional first. They won't do it. They probably won't even offer that. But if you could get a really good prospect, maybe you roll the dice and you take Zaboral and another prospect for him, and you roll the dice on that, because at this point, Vatanen was never going to re-sign. So,
and there's been some speculation that Vatanen is probably headed back to Anaheim. If he becomes a free agent, and I wouldn't see why not. And Anaheim is, shorthanded on defense, which is ironic because they were always really deep on defense. But now, they had to trade for Gabranson, and they're not really deep on the blue line any longer. Joe asks, Habs lose to the Isles. Is Julian fired? No, I don't think so.
I'm going to say no. I know there's speculation out there, but right now I'm still going to say no.
Let's see. Oh, Derek Bronson says the plane. I guess that was in reference to Fantasy Island, like I said. Asmir, would the Devils package him with Hall to Colorado? I mean, anything's possible. It's a question of what Joe Sakic would be willing to pay. And I
don't know what their cap is. Can they handle both of them? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think so, but I'll check as we're talking here.
I mean, if let's just say for argument's sake, until Mike looks it up, if they could handle both of them, then you might be able to get somebody like Zadorov and either a conditional first or another good prospect in their system. Maybe something like that.
Colorado currently has $7.9 million in cap space.
So at the deadline, they might be able to squeeze it.
Yeah.
And the Devils could retain. If the Devils retained, they might be able to get someone like Zadorov, because I think you could get Zadorov, and I got to look through their system real quick because I'm not coming up.
Well, that's why I mentioned Timmins.
Yeah. I don't think the Devils would want Timmins. They need to get bona fide, because Subban's not going to be around forever. And so I think that's an issue where they have to get something now, because otherwise they're going to go through another rebuild. Mm-hmm. And I don't think Shiro wants to necessarily do that, because I don't think that's in his best interest. All right, let's see real quick. See if there's one more question. Sorry, my computer.
Okay. Yeah, there's a question here from Steve James. Actually, had a couple questions. One, Mike, should the Leafs trade Nylander if he's still hot at the deadline, or do they wait until the draft? No, I don't think they're trading Nylander this year, but I think it's encouraging in the fact that he is scoring. As typical of Nylander, he follows up a horrendous game with a decent game. He was -4 in Buffalo. I was tracking him at the game. He made a couple really bad behind the back passes on the power play. There was a couple stretches where he was just like drifting around the ice, and then he plays a good game against the Sabres in Toronto the following night and scores a goal. So that's the thing that's really baffling and annoying about him, is that he's got the ability. He just doesn't seem to want to apply himself all the time.
Yeah.
But I think that if they trade him, especially if he has a really good year this year and scores 30 goals. I know Dubas said today at the Ford Performance Center, their practice facility, that because today was the almost 1 year anniversary. He signed on December 1st last year, and Dubas said, "Well, we're finally getting our money's worth now." Of course, he's going to say that because he's the one who paid him. But does that mean that he's going to show up when the team needs him, or can he perform without Matthews? Which I continue to say he's more of a complimentary guy to Matthews and not a guy who carries the play.
Yeah.
Sometimes he does, but sometimes he doesn't.
I'm going to say, from Colorado's standpoint with this Vatanen deal, I give you Nikita Zadorov, and I'll give you the rights to Sampo Ranta, who's playing for University of Minnesota. He's a big forward. He's got like 10 points in 16 games. He is a goal scorer. I think that's something where if you can walk away from that with New Jersey for two guys that, and you're going to get a pick too, obviously, because Taylor Hall's in there, I think you could probably live with that. And maybe that's what Colorado does to give themselves the best chance of the cup, and then they worry about these contracts of these players after the season. They might be willing. That could be something that could happen. That is about the only way that Shiro comes out of this looking halfway decent.
Steve also asked, with Keefe now the head coach, will we see a lot of Marlies promoted within season into next on entry-level deals? Well, Pierre Engvall's been called up and has played really well. I think when Marner comes back, if it's this Wednesday at home against Colorado, they will have to make corresponding moves to open up space. I believe they will probably end up waiving a guy like Nick Shore, because Nick Shore is, he's a 13th, 14th forward. They can really do without him. They're not going to waive Spezza. Spezza has had 6 points in his last 6 games. He's played well with the opportunity under Keefe. I would say that Spezza should be their fourth line center, and then Freddie Gauthier should sit, and we'll see whether that's going to happen or not. They seem to be in the back-to-backs rotating some of their forwards, so we'll see what happens. There was one more question here. Oh, Thomas asked. Go ahead, Russ.
No, go ahead.
Thomas says, is Tortorella on the hot seat? No. He just
they knew.
He got a new contract, and that team, I told you from the very beginning that team was not making the playoffs because everybody left.
Yeah.
So how can you blame Torts?
Something to keep an eye on. The other day, I felt like for a period and a half, the Detroit Red Wings played, and then they just didn't play against the Flyers. After the game, they were asked about their goal differential, which at the time was -50. This is really affecting the players. The veterans don't want this to happen. And Mike, they're at -53.
Yeah.
They're going to have the worst goal differential in a very long time, considering we're not even at the All-Star break yet.
No, again, we looked at that team, and not only looking at the team, but also looking at what Yzerman did in the offseason. And all he did was signed Bernier. He signed the Finnish guy, played Philadelphia, played in Tampa Bay, Filppula.
Yeah.
And a defenseman and a depth defenseman. They used to play in Dallas. That's all he did in free agency. That's it.
Yeah.
They knew this team would suck. And that they basically what Yzerman is going to do, and Yzerman, I think, has done a decent job at picking here and there, getting Perlini, getting Robbie Fabry, getting Adam Ernie, finding guys who might be able to plug in third line.
And Ernie's not scoring right now. He's just
right, and none of it is guaranteed to work, but it was low risk. He gave up practically nothing for Adam Ernie. He gave Jakob Delarose for Robbie Fabry. Yeah. So I think that those players, they brought them in to be roster fillers, like P.A. Parento was it with Toronto a few years ago.
In 16-17, the Colorado Avalanche were -112. I think the Red Wings can catch them.
All right, last one here. Anthony, proposal trade coming on the heels of what Eck was reporting, because he was reporting that he thinks Goudreau is in the wind. would Calgary trade Goudreau for Gostisbehere and JVR?
No, because nobody could balance that cap wise. Calgary can't balance that cap wise, and the Flyers can't retain anything.
Right. It would have to be. It would have to be. Gostisbehere's making 4, JVR's making 7.
Right.
Goudreau is making close to 7. So you would have to include in the deal on the Calgary side with a $4 to $4.5 million contract. Does that mean TJ Brody?
It would have to be something like that. I don't think that deal happens. Though.
Right. I think there's, that's trade. That I don't know. I honestly do not think they're trading Goudreau.
I don't either.
So, all right, good show, guys. We will be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching.